A Nazir is not born. Haftarat Parashat Naso. A few weeks ago, while discussing the Haftarah for Parashat Shmini, we focused on the power of the concentrated Haftarah, how it chooses to zero in on just a few verses from a long parasha and thereby transform that section into the parasha's central message. This week's challenge will be to see whether we can recreate that same interpretive process with our own parasha. Before diving into that question, a brief overview is in order. Parashat Naso is the single longest parasha in the Torah, yet for all its length, it's not particularly rich in narrative or thematic development. Out of its 178 verses, the first 39 describe the roles of the sons of Gershon and Merari in the Midbar journey. The last 79, highly repetitive verses, detail the offerings of the tribal Nisi'im at the dedication of the altar. 4 verses describe the expulsion of the ritually impure from the camp. 6 discuss the guilt offering for misappropriated property. 21 are devoted to the laws of the Sotah, the suspected adulteress. 6 record the Birkat Kohanim, priestly blessings, and the remaining 21 verses, the laws of the Nazir, the person who vows to abstain from wine and other impurities. The Haftarah chooses to focus exclusively on those final 21 verses about the Nazir, telling the story of the most famous Nazir in Jewish history, Shimshon. For the statisticians among us, it's worth noting that by focusing on the Nazir section, the Haftarah is drawing from less than 1/8 of the parasha. But beyond the numbers, something else is just as striking. While Shimshon is the classic example of a biblical Nazir, he is also a most atypical one. Yes, he's the only Nazir whose life as a Nazir is actually chronicled in the Tanakh, but his form of Nazirut life diverges sharply from what's described in the Torah. Allow me to explain. Already in the time of the Mishnah, the sages recognized essential differences between the Nazirut status of Shimshon and that of standard Nazirim. The 3 primary restrictions of the standard Nazir are no haircutting, no consumption of wine or grape products, and no contact with the dead. While Shimshon clearly refrains from cutting his hair and is not portrayed as a drinker, he certainly does not avoid corpse impurity. In fact, he's famous precisely because of the trail of Philistine bodies he leaves in his wake. To those who would argue that Shimshon simply failed to uphold his Nazir status, I would point to our Haftarah, which completely ignores the restrictions on corpse impurity, and also to Judges 16, where it's clear that Hashem reacts only when Shimshon violates his vow by cutting his hair. That's the moment when his Nazirut strength leaves him, not when he starts touching dead bodies. Another crucial detail is this. If we read closely, we see that the Haftarah does not actually deal with Nazirut, but rather with preparation for Nazirut. When Manoach finally gets to meet Malach Hashem, he asks a very reasonable question. What should we be doing with this child? What's his role? It's a fair question because when Malach Hashem first appears to his wife, he didn't give any instructions concerning the future child. Yes, Malach told her a razor should not come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazir for Hashem from the womb, but these are general statements. When the angel appears to Manoach, he doesn't repeat them. Instead, he re-emphasizes the restrictions that apply to her, Manoach's wife. No wine, no impure food shall she eat. This leads to a deeper question. Why did the Haftarah focus not on the laws of the Nazir, but on something that merely overlaps with them? Perhaps the answer is that if we settle too quickly for the most obvious explanation of the Haftarah Parasha connection, we risk missing an opportunity for a broader, deeper insight. Take, for example, the section that takes up the most space in the parasha, the dedication of the altar. Much ink has been spilled over the seemingly endless repetition of this section. To draw a parallel, imagine that instead of describing the Shabbat offerings once, the Torah repeated the offering for every Shabbat of the year. Or worse, God forbid, imagine reading the daily Tamid offering over and over and over and over and over again for the full length of a year's reading. So why don't we find this repetition excessive when it comes to the dedication of the tribal Nisi'im? I believe the difference lies in the nature of the ceremony. It's a Chanukat HaMizbeach, a dedication of the altar. Chinuch, as Rashi notes, connotes initiation, an expression of beginning of a person or object entering the role it is destined to perform. This is not routine temple service, it's the preliminary stage, the qualifying round. At such a formative moment, it would be insulting to say that Netanel ben Soarz simply brought the same thing as Nachshon ben Aminadav. It would cheapen the symbolic meaning of what each tribe was offering going forward. The concept of a preparatory stage is a recurring theme throughout the parasha. Think of the jealous husband and his wife, who are essentially hoping to restart their relationship. Think of the Levi'im, whose job is to transport the Mishkan to its next resting place. And of course, think of the Nazir, who, before vowing to take a Nazirut vow to set himself apart for Hashem, must first prepare himself. He must know what that vow entails. And that, I believe, could be the aim of our Haftarah. Before the birth of Shimshon, the one who would begin to deliver Israel, his mother, and to a lesser degree his father, must be ready and worthy of him. She must abstain from wine. She must not eat anything impure. She must understand that just as there is no temple service without dedication, just as a good marriage doesn't simply happen, a Nazir is not born, a Nazir is raised. In memory of my beloved and heroic student Amichai Shimon ben Ishai Uvatya Rubin Hashem Yikom Damo, Dovi Holtz, one who loves Tanakh.